Gloria Estefan held the letter out across the desk with both hands, and Jimmy Fallon took it. He unfolded it carefully. He read the first line, then the second. Then something in his face changed. His mouth kept moving, but the words stopped coming out. He tried once. He tried again. He lowered the paper slowly to the desk, pressed both palms flat against it, and looked up at the ceiling with his eyes full. 300 people did not make a sound. It was a Thursday night taping. March 2024. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, Rockefeller Center. Gloria Estefan was the musical guest, the first time she had performed on late-night television in nearly 4 years. 300 people in that studio understood exactly what they were about to witness. A legend. The woman whose voice had soundtracked 30 years of their lives. The woman who, by every medical measure, should never have walked onto a stage again. Gloria Estefan walked onto that stage the way she always has, not cautiously, not carefully, not with any of the visible tentativeness that the world expected from her after 1990. She walked the way a person walks who has decided, at some point in the past and without room for revision, that walking onto stages is simply what she does. The audience gave her what the audience always gives her. She smiled the way she smiles, with her whole face, and she sat down across from Jimmy Fallon, and they talked with the ease of two people who have known each other for years. The interview was warm, the band was in form, the cameras move the way cameras move when a night is going exactly as planned. And then Gloria Estefan reached into the inside pocket of her jacket. Slowly, deliberately, her fingers found what they were looking for, and she drew it out and set it on the desk between them. Not a photograph. Not a recording. Just an envelope, white, slightly worn at the corners, the way paper gets when it has been handled many times without being opened. The kind of envelope that has been carried from one place to another for years, waiting, she said. I think it's time you read this. Jimmy Fallon looked at the envelope, then at Gloria Estefan. His voice, when he found it, was careful. What is this? It's a letter, she said. It was written for you. It's been waiting for you for a long time. He picked it up. He turned it over. On the front, in handwriting that was precise and slightly formal, the handwriting of someone who learned penmanship in a different era, was a single name. Jimmy. The entire studio froze. The roots stopped playing. Not gradually, not on a cue. The music simply stopped. The way music stops, when the people making it understand that something more important is happening. The floor director, 3 steps from his monitor, did not call a shot. Nobody in the production booth reached for a headset. The audience sat very still, the way people sit when they are afraid that any movement might break something they don't fully understand yet. Was he sick? Someone near the back whispered, "Is something wrong with her?" Nothing was wrong with her. But something was happening that had been a long time coming, and the people in that studio could feel it the way you feel a change in weather, in the body before the mind understands it. Jimmy Fallon unfolded the letter. He read the first line. And then he read the second. And then his mouth kept moving and the words stopped coming out. Because some things, when you finally encounter them, cannot be read aloud. They can only be felt. He pressed his palms flat on the desk. He looked up at the ceiling. 300 people held their breath. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in March of 1990. Gloria Estefan wasn't always Gloria Estefan, global icon, survivor, the woman they called unstoppable. In the early months of 1990, Gloria Estefan was 32 years old, the most famous woman in pop music, and completely, privately exhausted. The Get On Your Feet World Tour had been running for months, the kind of months that compress into a single blurred memory of hotel corridors and stage lights, and the particular silence of tour buses moving through the dark between cities. She had given everything she had to give, and then she had given more, because that was what the schedule required. On March 20th, 1990, the tour bus carrying Gloria Estefan, her husband Emilio, and their 9-year-old son Naib was stopped in a snowstorm on Interstate 380 in Pennsylvania. A tractor-trailer failed to slow in time. The collision was catastrophic. Naib suffered a broken collarbone. Emilio fractured 2 ribs. Gloria Estefan's spine was fractured in 2 places. The surgeons who operated on her the following morning placed 2 steel rods along her spinal column in a surgery that lasted more than 4 hours. They told her, with the careful precision that surgeons use when the news is not good, that she would likely walk again. That performing again was a different question. That the road back, if there was a road back, would be longer than anything she had experienced before. She heard what they said. She thanked them. And then, in the quiet of her hospital room at Lehigh Valley Hospital in Allentown, Pennsylvania, with the snow still coming down outside and her husband asleep in the chair beside her bed, she made a decision. Not a public decision. Not the kind of decision that becomes a press release. A private one. Made in the dark, in the particular silence that follows catastrophe. She decided she was going to dance again. She didn't know how. She didn't know when. She just decided. What she didn't know, what she could not have known, was that there was a woman in Allentown who had been listening. Her name was Rosaria Benedetti. She was 67 years old. A retired music teacher who had spent 38 years in the Allentown public school system, teaching children to find their voices, to trust them, to understand that a voice is not just a sound, but a choice. The choice to be heard. She had retired 3 years earlier, and she had filled the quiet of retirement the way people fill such quiet when they have spent their lives in rooms full of children. She listened to music constantly, and she noticed what it did to people, and she believed, with the certainty of someone who had spent decades watching children discover what they were made of, that music was not a talent. It was a form of courage. She had been a fan of Gloria Estefan since the Miami Sound Machine. Not in the way that people are fans, not the concerts and the records and the merchandise. She was a fan the way teachers are fans of the things they teach, with a kind of professional reverence for the craft underneath the glamour. She played Gloria Estefan's recordings in her classroom, not as background, as instruction. She would stop a song at a particular moment and say, "Do you hear what she's doing there? Do you hear how she's holding back before she opens up? That is what control sounds like. That is what courage sounds like." When the accident happened, Rosaria Benedetti read every article. She watched every news report. And then she sat down at the desk in the front room of her house on Chew Street in Allentown, a desk she had written lesson plans at for nearly 4 decades. And she wrote a letter. She did not write it to a management company. She did not write it to a publicist. She wrote it to the hospital, addressed to Gloria Estefan, care of the nursing staff, and she asked. She did not demand. She did not plead. She simply asked if someone could make sure it reached her. Someone did. The letter was 8 pages long. Rosaria Benedetti wrote about music the way she had always talked about music, with precision, with love, and without sentimentality. She wrote about what it meant to come back, not in the language of inspiration. She had no patience for that language, but in the language of craft. She wrote that the voice does not forget, that the body, when it has been trained, when it has been given thousands of hours of deliberate, loving attention, does not simply release what it has learned, that the muscles remember, that the breath remembers, that the part of a person that becomes a singer is not in the spine. She wrote, "You are afraid that the accident took something from you that cannot be recovered. I have watched children who were told they could not sing become singers. I have watched people who were told they could not speak find their voices. What you have is not in your back. It is in every room you have ever walked into and filled. The rooms are still there. So are you." She signed it with her full name and her address on Chew Street, and she said nothing more. Gloria Estefan read it 3 times the morning it arrived. She did not write back immediately. She was not yet in a condition to write much of anything. But she kept it. She kept it the way you keep something that finds you at the exact moment you needed to be found. The road back was long, harder than the surgeons had described, and the surgeons had not soft-pedaled it. There were days when the pain was a wall she could not find a door in. There were days when she sat at the edge of her bed in Miami and could not make herself stand up. On those days, she read the letter. Not for comfort. For the thing Rosaria Benedetti had understood about her, that she was not always able to hold on to herself. That she was not broken. That she was the rooms she had filled. That those rooms were still there. In January 1991, 10 months after the accident, Gloria Estefan walked on stage at the American Music Awards and performed Coming Out of the Dark. 3,000 people in that room stood before she reached the first chorus. She never wrote to Rosaria Benedetti. Not because she forgot. Because she did not know how to write a letter that would be equal to the one she had received. She told herself she would find the right words. She told herself she would find the time. Fame, she had learned a long time ago, is very good at consuming the time that belongs to the things that matter most. 23 years passed. In the fall of 2023, Gloria Estefan received a message through her management from a woman in Allentown, Pennsylvania. The message was brief. It said that Rosaria Benedetti had passed away in September of that year, at the age of 100, peacefully, at home, surrounded by her family. It said that before she passed, Rosaria had given her daughter a letter, already addressed, already sealed, already stamped. A letter she had written the previous spring, when she still had the strength to write clearly, and that her instructions had been simple. "When I'm gone, please make sure this gets to her." The letter had been addressed to Gloria Estefan's management company. Inside the sealed letter was a second envelope. White, slightly worn at the corners, the way paper gets when it has been carried from one place to another for many years. On the front, in Rosaria Benedetti's precise and slightly formal handwriting, was a single name. Jimmy. Behind the scenes, Gloria Estefan had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She had told no one at The Tonight Show what the envelope contained. She had not told the segment producers. She had not briefed the booker. She had told only one person, her manager, and what she had told him was this: "I'm going to bring it on. I'm not going to explain it beforehand. I'm going to let him read it." Her manager had asked if she was certain. She said, "I've been carrying it since November. I think it's time someone else carried it for a while." What the production staff knew was that Gloria Estefan was appearing to perform and to do a standard interview. What they did not know was that she had been rehearsing this moment in her mind for 4 months, since the day the second envelope had arrived and she had understood, finally, what Rosaria Benedetti had always intended. The letter had not been written for her. The letter had been written years before she had any reason to write it, by a woman who had watched a young man on late-night television laugh and perform and connect with people, and who had understood something about him, in the way that teachers understand things about people. The way that decades of watching children become themselves gives you a kind of sight that is difficult to explain. that she wanted him to know. Rosaria Benedetti had written the letter to Jimmy Fallon in 2014. She had written it after watching a segment on The Tonight Show in which Jimmy Fallon had talked, briefly and with visible difficulty, about anxiety, about the way his mind worked, about the thing underneath the laughter that he worked very hard to keep underneath. It had been a small moment, not the focus of the interview, gone in 30 seconds. But Rosaria had heard it the way she heard everything, with the full attention she had given to 38 years of children who needed someone to hear them fully. She had written 8 pages. She had written about courage and about craft and about the difference between performing for people and letting people in. She had written, "The laughter you give people is real. But I think you know that it is not all of what you have to give. I think you are saving something. I think you are afraid that if you let it out, it will be too much. It is not too much. It is exactly enough." She had addressed it to Jimmy. She had kept it for a decade, the way she had kept the letter she wrote to Gloria Estefan, not sending it, not knowing how to send it, holding it until the right moment arrived or until she was out of time to wait for the right moment. She had given it to her daughter in the spring of 2023. She had been 100 years old, and she had kept faith with 2 strangers for more than 30 years. Back in the studio, in the present, in the silence, with 300 people not breathing, Jimmy Fallon lifted his head from the ceiling and looked at Gloria Estefan. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, but the microphone on his lapel caught it perfectly. She wrote this in 2014. She kept it for 10 years, Gloria Estefan said. Her own voice was steady, the way her voice is always steady, trained to hold even when everything underneath is moving. She never sent it. She kept it until she couldn't wait anymore. A pause. She wanted you to have it. Jimmy Fallon looked back down at the letter in his hands. He did not try to read it again. He folded it, slowly, carefully, along the creases that were already there, the creases of 100 handlings by a woman who had believed in him without ever meeting him. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Jimmy Fallon stood up from behind his desk. He walked around it. He crossed to where Gloria Estefan was sitting, and he crouched down in front of her chair so that he was looking up at her. Not across a desk, not at eye level, but looking up at her. His hands holding the folded letter. His face not attempting to conceal a single thing that was happening on it. "She wrote the same letter to you," he said. Didn't she? Gloria Estefan's composure, which had held for the entire interview with the precision of a thing built to hold, shifted, just slightly. Just enough. "She wrote it to me when I was in the hospital," she said. "And I kept it for 33 years because I didn't know how to tell her what it meant." Her voice cracked, once, then steadied. "And then I found out she had written one to you, and I thought she deserved for someone to say it out loud. She deserved to be heard." Jimmy Fallon looked at the letter in his hands. "I've never met her," he said, his voice breaking. He stopped. "She didn't know me. She knew enough," Gloria Estefan said quietly. "She always knew enough." Questlove, behind the kit, set his sticks down on the snare very gently. The cameraman on the floor had stopped moving. The producer in the control room had stopped talking into the intercom. Jimmy Fallon stood back up. He turned to face the audience with the letter held against his chest, pressed flat with both hands, the way you hold something you are not ready to put down. He said, "Folks, I need a minute." 300 people gave him a standing ovation instead. The letter Rosaria Benedetti wrote to Jimmy Fallon in 2014 has never been read publicly. It remains folded in its original envelope, which Jimmy Fallon keeps in the top drawer of his desk at 30 Rock. Not in a frame, not in a case. In the drawer, within reach. The letter she wrote to Gloria Estefan in 1990 is on display in Gloria Estefan's home in Miami. It is not framed, either. It is in a small, clear sleeve, set on a shelf in the room where she practices, beside a photograph of Rosaria Benedetti's classroom, taken sometime in the 1970s, 26 children at their desks, looking at a woman who is looking back at them like they are capable of anything. Rosaria Benedetti taught music in the Allentown Public Schools for 38 years. In that time, she taught more than 1,400 children. She never became famous. She never tried to. She believed that the point of paying attention to people was not to be thanked for it, but to ensure that they knew they had been seen. She was right about both of them. Some people listen so carefully that what they hear, they carry for a lifetime and give back at the exact moment it is needed, to the person it always belonged to.